Welcome everyone, and thanks so much for joining the last event in our ABNY University Bootcamp, How to Run a Successful Campaign. We are so excited to have the amazing Kimberly Peeler-Allen with us to conclude the series and also kick off our young professional programming for the year. This is our first event of 2022, and we're so excited that you could all join us. My name is Sarah Samuels. I'm the Programs and Communication Manager here at ABNY, and we encourage you to watch the other two events in the series on our YouTube channel, and for the full effect. But we're so excited to have you here today. Coming up, we actually have a very exciting new series, ABNY Boardroom Breakfast, where we spotlight different ABNY board members and ABNY Foundation trustees, and we hope you can join us. It's part of the rollout of our new program for YP associates. And if you have any questions how you can get involved, just reach out to me, and we encourage you all to apply. Last thing, please promote ABNY at A Better NY on all social channels. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Kimberly and Constantine, and I will pass it off to YP steering member Constantine Titonis to moderate the discussion. Thanks.
Thank you, Sarah, and hi, everyone. My name is Constantine Titonis. I'm Senior Policy Analyst in NYU's Office of Government Affairs, and I'm a proud member of ABNY's YP Steering Committee. So welcome to ABNY University Bootcamp, How to Run a Successful Political Campaign. And like Sarah mentioned, this is session 3 in the series, and today we're focusing on how to organize and to affect change in the electoral process. Always a timely topic, but especially as we enter the 2022 midterm election season. So it's my honor to introduce our speaker for today, Kimberly Peeler-Allen. Ms. Peeler-Allen is currently a visiting practitioner at the Center for American Women and Politics at Rutgers University. She is a senior advisor to New York State Attorney General Letitia James's re-election campaign. And over the course of her career, Ms. Peeler-Allen has advised elected officials, candidates, and organizations on fundraising, political strategy, and coalition building to ensure that there are more diverse voices around decision-making tables, whether they're in elected bodies or in civil society. In 2011, she co-founded Higher Heights, the nation's leading organization dedicated to building Black women's collective political power from the voting booth to elected office. She has many other professional accomplishments worthy of note, including participating in the Roddenberry Fellowship, serving as board chair of the ERA Coalition and co-chair of Higher Heights for America PAC, and serving as a board member of Act Blue, the Fund for Women's Equity, and NARAL, Pro-Choice America. So Ms. Peeler-Allen, thank you for joining us. It's an honor, and please feel free to take it away.
Thank you so much, Constantine. Thank you so much to ABNY Young Professionals for inviting me here to have this important conversation about, how do you want to be the change in the world? And look forward to this being a great conversation. I will definitely be presenting, but want to hear from all of you what you're thinking about, what your questions are. So please put them in the chat. And I know Constantine will be sorting through those as we go, and definitely leave time at the end. So this conversation, I put it together to try and, find a middle ground for everyone, that whether you are thinking about running for public office, whether you are thinking about starting a issue advocacy campaign, you want to be a super volunteer somewhere, or just trying to figure out how you can have a greater impact. I hope you'll be able to take away some good nuggets from this. So I'm going to get started by sharing my screen. All right. So, how to organize to affect change in the electoral process. And there's so much that is out there that is keeping us up late at night. And the question is always, how can we make a difference? How can we have an impact in changing things? the question that I always, have asked myself, repeatedly over the course of my career, and I know probably many of you have dwelled on this quote as well: be the change you want to see in the world. And graduating from college, that was, I think, one of the lines of my graduation speaker: be the change. So how can you be the change based on where you are in your life and what your interests are? How can you be that change? So hopefully I'll give some guidance as to how that can be. So what do you want to change and why? So much of how things happen in society overall is based on your personal interests. What are the things that keep you up at night? What are the experiences that you have had that you want to have change differently? So whether it's the environment and you're concerned about climate change or social justice or reproductive freedom, what are the things that are really concerning to you, and why? What is that personal story that draws you to that issue that you've said, what, I need to lean in here in some way, shape, or form on this particular topic? So think about that. What is that motivating issue for you, and why? Is it a personal story? Is it an experience of a family member, or just outrage from what you're seeing in the media? Think about that and use that as a guiding light as to help motivate and determine that how you will be that change in the world. How involved do you want to be? How much time do you really have? Are you looking for a change in your career? When you're thinking you want to run for office, that you can be the most impactful on this particular issue by being an elected official? Do you want to work for, volunteer with, or donate to a candidate or cause? You want to support candidates that more than just being that one candidate as a candidate for elected office, but you want to support candidates across New York or across the country that are champions around your particular issue? Or are you going to lean into a nonprofit or an advocacy organization that is focused on the issue that you're concerned about? Are you going to organize your own community and your own network around a particular issue? This often comes up around, really local issues, things that, are happening in your community, in your block, within your community board, and talk to your neighbors and your colleagues and your friends about how they feel about this issue that is burning for you. Or volunteer with an existing organization focused on an issue. So as I mentioned before, you can really lean in on an issue. And many nonprofits are looking for, they like to call them super volunteers, people who have a tremendous amount of skills and a passion about an issue, as well as the time to put in to be able to really help move the needle forward. So figure out where do you want to be, and that answer can change over the course of time. You may be thinking you want to run for office, or you say maybe not yet. I want to organize around a particular issue, and also thinking about how can I be most effective. So we'll talk about the ways that power moves and the ways that you can move an issue shortly. So what are the levers that can create that change? Is it passing legislation through the halls of Congress, getting some judicial decisions and trying things in the courts? Or is it the court of public opinion and rallying and organizing and putting pressure on elected officials or gatekeepers to change a policy or advance awareness around a particular injustice or issue? And where does the power reside? This is ultimately the biggest question, because where the power resides, that is where there is the opportunity to really create the most change. If you understand that map, because you could say, well, I want to, make some changes in the state's environmental laws. well, who determines what those laws are? How can you influence them? Is it important to have a petition with thousands of signatures from all across the state? Will that get their attention? Is it important to be able to engage in a media campaign where you're talking, writing op-eds, letters to the editor around a particular issue, and making making some noise that way? Or is it talking to your elected leaders to say, this is the policy that I think you should take under consideration? Because one of the things that, particularly with that last part about talking to your elected officials, and it's actually called lobbying, and in some circles, lobbying has a negative connotation. But really, at the end of the day, as American citizens, it is part of our responsibility as the electorate to hold our elected officials accountable. And that goes to telling them what we want them to do, telling them that, what we're not happy with that they've done, and really expressing and sharing your opinions on the issues and the topics that are in front of them so that they can best represent you. So making sure that message is clear. And if it is a regulatory body, they may have a public opinion space where you can raise your voice that way by submitting remarks either for or against a particular policy, or saying, I'm going to run for public office and change the makeup of the people around the table and their experiences and their feelings around this particular issue by putting myself up as a candidate who will be a champion for issue X. So thinking through how does the power move and where does it reside, and what are the pressure points that can actually make a difference there. So the formal power brokers are the elected leaders, the appointed and government leaders, the government regulators. Those are all, you're thinking about the decisions around the CDC. They have the power there, and there is very little in some spaces like the CDC where we can lobby for changes in policy. But I think it's important for the public to let them know the impact and the either agreement or disagreement with the decisions that they make around, all sorts of things, because that they do take that into consideration. It is not a direct pressure point the way some of the other, particularly elected leaders have, but there is still an opportunity for community feedback and community engagement. Then also the question could be, how do you lobby to become and one of these appointed government leaders where you can have that influence? And we just had elected a new mayor in the city, and he is in the process of staffing up. And if you are particularly passionate about a particular issue, submit your resume to work in that particular department so that you can help shape and engage in that way. That is another way that you can have an influence on change and in the electoral process and overall. So the informal power brokers are, often called the squeaky wheels, the influencers. We've seen, in the advent of social media, how much can be done through influencers and, just basically elevating and amplifying a particular issue or particular position on an issue. Community activists, who are the people who have their ear to the ground on and the organizers around a particular issue, and they have as much. They also have a tremendous amount of power in being able to help shape a policy position, as well as informing elected officials or government employees, the pros and cons of whatever it is that they're doing. And lastly is donors. Many donors affirm candidates in their positions by supporting them with financial contributions. We want to see, we're proud of the work that you're doing on the environment, so we are, we're going to support you even more. because we want to continue that work. Or the reverse is true. And I know this was addressed in your one of your previous sessions, or talking about the campaign plan. How do you put together your fundraising plan? And that is also, another side of it is the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So, you may be, someone who is running against someone who I really don't like because of their position on X, Y, and Z issue. So I'm going to support you and help use that power base to help shift and make change in the electoral process. So as you're making your decision of how to, how you're going to be that change in the world, think about, how much do you know about the issue that keeps you up at night? What is, the issue that's your primary focus? How much do you know about it? The ins and outs of it, the legislation, the regulation, the people that have been involved, who was involved previously, who is currently involved. And then what have you done in your experience to show that you're a credible ally and an asset to the cause? So if you're thinking about, joining up with a nonprofit that is focused on your issue, how have you demonstrated through your, personal interest or your conversations with friends, colleagues, or previous volunteer work that you are you're an asset to this cause? If you're thinking about running for office, how have you demonstrated your commitment to the community around this issue and others? And you're a known entity as someone who can get things done. So think about what you have done and what you can do to continue to expand both your knowledge base and your networks within a particular issue area and your own work to help advance that change. So what do you need to learn? When we started Higher Heights back in 2011, we actually spent almost, I would say about 18 months talking to people about what were the previous experiences of trying to organize and elect Black women. There had been some previous organizations that had done it individually. There were, some candidates, elected Black women in Congress, and others who had all been in and around that space. And we wanted to try and amass as much information of that prior experience as possible, so that we could know what we needed to, lean into, what was successful, and most importantly, what were the lessons learned, so we didn't fall into those same pitfalls again. So, what were those lived experiences? How much do you know about the landscape overall, the previous strategy, what worked and what failed, and what were the intermittent successes or the intermittent setbacks? What are the roadblocks out there that you may not be aware of? Is there, something out there that's, there's a regulation, that's coming from the federal government that means that we cannot do, this is a dead issue until this bigger piece is moved, understanding that type of landscape. And then lastly, who else is thinking about this in the same way that you are? And is there an opportunity to partner with them and share knowledge and work together on this particular issue? So, if you're thinking about starting an advocacy campaign around a particular issue, who else is in the space? What else has been done? Who else is looking at this with fresh eyes? I think there's always need for new people to come into a movement because they bring a different life experience. But also you have to understand what has come before and what you can learn from, as well as what your fresh experience brings to the conversation and brings to the work. So do that landscape analysis overall, and always have an open eye to learn what else is out there, because there's, guarantee that you don't know all that there is about an issue. One of the quotes that someone gave me years ago that has hung with me for now and moving forward is this: you do not know all that there is to know about what you know. And I love that because it really, centers you in the fact, like, you may think that you're an expert, but there's always something more that you can learn about a particular issue or particular thing, or even a person. This was actually in a child development class for new parents, and they said, you do not know all that there is to know about what you know pertaining to your child, and that was definitely something to think about. It's like, you think you know everything about your child because it's your child, but there are things that you may not know, and you have to be open to that and open to that learning. So as you're thinking about the change that you want to see in the world, what does winning look like? And this is where it can be very frustrating, because we want to see immediate changes. We want to see instant impact. And so often with these large challenges, it's not a quick fix. There's always the short term, the medium term, and the long term goals. The ultimate goal is often the long term goal. And sometimes you move back and forth between all three of those. So you may have a short term goal, the short term win, and the medium term win, and then something happens and you're back to the short term win, or a small piece of the long term win, and then you're back at the medium, in your medium goal. So you have to be able to move back and forth and be comfortable with that. It is not going to be a straight trajectory. Sometimes you sit in a holding pattern and for a very long time, in one particular space, trying to move to that next hurdle. So I think you have to really think through and get comfortable with the fact that it is not a direct line. Through my work with the Equal Rights Amendment Coalition, and the Equal Rights Amendment was originally introduced almost 100 years ago. 2023 will be 100 years since Alice Paul wrote the initial amendment. We are 50 years in March from when it passed out of Congress to go through the ratification process, and it is still not officially the 28th Amendment to the Constitution. So there have been a lot of fits and starts, small successes here and there, but we have not reached that long-term goal. But you just have to keep plodding along. Hopefully, many of these other issues that you may be focused on do not take 100+ years. But criminal justice reform is an example of one that has really been ongoing since the conception of this country. So there are pieces, and you have to really think through what you're comfortable with, and get comfortable with being uncomfortable, and using that as a motivating factor to continue to march on towards change and justice. So what are the opportunities that are presented to you to make a difference? So there's the legislative process. Is there a piece of legislation that is moving through either the city council or the state legislature or Congress that would improve the situation for the issue that you care about? And how can you be involved in that process? Is there a ballot initiative? We saw a bunch of ballot initiatives on the ballot in 2021 here in the city. They didn't necessarily do well. There's a lot of discussion about why that is, but that is also an opportunity. Is there an opportunity to lobby for an executive order to come from the governor or the mayor or even the president on a particular issue? Elections, change, there's an opportunity to run someone against someone who has been bad on your issue, or you are going to run against someone who's been bad on your issue. And then lastly is the momentum. We've seen where we've had, in the 60s, we saw the civil rights, the voting rights, civil rights, and all kind of piggyback on each other because there was momentum in that movement and momentum in that space. Where is there momentum that is happening in legislation or the temperament of the country. We saw this with marriage equality as it was moving through state legislatures across the country. Eventually it got to the federal level. So there is that. So how do you build on the momentum that is happening in other places or even within or there, momentum with an adjacent issue that you can harness that power, that energy to help advance your particular issue as well. So this goes back also to the landscape, understanding what are the things that you need to learn, what is the broader ecosystem as we're seeing more, fewer. We're trying to break down the silos, particularly in the social justice realm, where we're seeing environmental justice and reproductive justice and civil rights all more come together and work collectively because of that momentum and really how all of these issues are interconnected in many, many ways. So think through those pieces as well. So what are the challenges? Time is never our friend. So how much time do you have? It's never enough, so you've got to work quick. Resources. How much money do you have to spend? What is the social capital that you have that you're able to use? What are the current laws and regulations that could be working against you as you try to move the needle overall? Are there prominent stakeholders that are very loudly working against your issue? That could also be a challenge. And it could also be an opportunity on the other side if you have a prominent stakeholder who's very loud in supporting your issue. And the general public's awareness about your issue. How much education do you have to provide to the electorate or to the general public so that they also demand the change that you want to see in the world? So these are all challenges that can really compress or expand as your issue advocacy or as your issue advocacy continues. So what is the message? So you've done all of this thought around what is motivating you. What is the message that you are telling people about why they should care or why you care? You want to be involved in this particular issue. Why is that compelling, and how can you use that story and that message to bring other people to the other people into the fold? Because I think this is constantly part of the conversation, is you can't move things as an individual, but you can really move things as a collective. And the more we work collectively, the better and more impact we will have. So what is that compelling message? And what is your strategy? So as we talked earlier about how much time do you have? How much interest do you have? What are the opportunities and the challenges that are out there? What is your strategy to create the change? You may feel like, okay, looking at my personal time, my personal resources and needs, and where things are in the ecosystem overall, my strategy is to become a super volunteer with this particular nonprofit, and I will do all that I can to join their lobby days. I will write letters to the editor. I will tell my friends and family about it. I will help organize, but I can't give more than that. That's your strategy. Or you may say, okay, I'm going to run for public office. And then that is a whole strategy. Or I'm going to start an issue advocacy campaign or a nonprofit organization. That is also a strategy. So thinking through the power pieces, what are the levers that can be pressed? What are the best ways to do that? What is your personal temperament for creating that change? And that is ultimately your strategy. And who are your partners in this space? I can't emphasize this enough. I talked about it just a bit ago about, together we can make more change. Who are the partners? Who are the organizations and entities and allies who are also concerned about this? And everyone, there's very much the understanding in the movement space that we all may have slightly different tactics, but we're unified on the same goal. So you have to, do a, come at it from all angles to try and move. And you don't know which one will necessarily be successful, or maybe it will be a combination of pressure from multiple angles that actually create the change that you're looking for. So who are your partners? How can you align with those partners? How can you be a good partner and listen to and collaborate with other people and organizations that are already in that space? And if you're thinking about that, either a campaign, starting a campaign, running for office, being able to financially support causes and candidates that you care about, how much money do you need and where will it come from? Is it coming from your own wallet? Are you looking to get grants to start a nonprofit around a particular issue? Are you, as a candidate, going to start dialing for dollars and using your network and your various spheres of engagement and influence to raise the money that you need? So think that is also all part of your strategy and the elements that go into that. So if you go the route of a candidate or starting a nonprofit or issue advocacy campaign, you need to put together your team. And I think that was part of the first conversation that ABNY Young Professionals pulled together around your campaign plan. So the key roles in this are your campaign manager, you need an organizer, a treasurer, and someone to help with your communications. So these are the key pieces that will help move things along. Your campaign manager, make sure that could be you. If you're starting an organization, you could see yourself as that campaign manager / organizer. If you're a candidate, you are not the campaign manager or the organizer or the treasurer or the communications person. You need to be the candidate. And you find people who can help you, either hired or as super volunteers who can help you with all of these pieces. So then you write your campaign plan. Work backwards from your long-term, medium-term, and short-term goals. To win, we need to do X, Y, and Z, and then work backwards. How do you make sure that you do X, Y, and Z? So from a personal standpoint of saying, okay, I want to support candidates who are all very, very active on voting rights. So what does that mean? Does it mean that you are going to make contributions to all of those candidates? How much will that require to be able to be very helpful to them? Are you going to volunteer for them? How much of your time are you setting aside to make phone calls or write letters on behalf of that candidate? So thinking that through, can you help them through the primary, or are you helping them through the general? Are you helping them transition into office after they win? How can you lend your expertise, and how does that help advance your overall goal in creating the change around a particular issue area that keeps you up at night? So with that, I think I've given you quite a bit. I see a couple of questions and coming in through the chat and the Q&A. So with all that, it's time to get to work. So hopefully I've given you some food for thought as you think about how you want to personally engage overall. And I look forward to your questions.
Thank you so much. This was awesome. And I have to say the Attorney General is very lucky to have you as an advisor. This was really informative. Strategizing and preparing for the campaign process, I guess you addressed it early on in the presentation. It's very much a learning process in and of itself. You're doing a lot of self-reflection. You're thinking about your personal story, using it somewhat as a compass to inform your policy positions, your approach, and then also along the way, you're listening, you're learning from the people that you're planning to serve. So it's very much a learning process, and I guess that ties into the first question that I wanted to ask. So being in the advocacy space myself, I often find it difficult to measure success. How do you know if your efforts are working, especially if your advocacy efforts are part of a much broader statewide or nationwide effort? So, an electoral campaign, it's easy to measure success by just simply measuring the share of votes you get at the end. But, or maybe it's not so easy. You could tell me. But how about in the context of a policy issue focused advocacy campaign?
I think it really is looking at the small victories. What are the incremental wins here and there? It may be, this one particular legislator has changed their position on your issue. It may not be enough to completely, put you over the top, but getting that one more is a good win. Being able to start to see a change in the discourse and the coverage, or how a particular topic is covered, is a way to also see a win. And then it's also getting real micro, someone in your network saying, you know what, I hadn't thought about it that way before, and I'm now definitely going to do X, or I'm recycling more, or you know what, I wasn't so sure about the vaccine, but I'm going to go get vaccinated now after our conversation. So you have to really look for both the kind of big impactful things, but also that interpersonal connection that can be very helpful in keeping you going, because some of these fights are very long and very hard fights, but there are often very incremental wins and inflection points that can be very, very helpful.
Yeah, I guess that goes to, so you talked a bit about short-term wins, long-term wins, intermediate, and so something to be attentive to, when you're strategizing and just rolling out any campaign. So that's really helpful. And so it's also related to an audience question. So how do you sustain change in the electoral process year after year, especially with an opposition working against you?
Well, you can't let up at all. You have to constantly affirm those who are in your camp, and make sure that they know that that there are people who are watching and supporting and amplifying and excited by the work that they're doing. Working with elected officials over the years, so many of them have said, you know what, we only hear the bad stuff when somebody doesn't agree with us. But when we're out here and we're taking these bold positions on issues, we don't hear anything, so we don't know. So it's very much, affirming, and don't take anything for granted. And we've seen this in other issues where folks have said, oh, we're good there, so we don't have to do anything. And the next thing you know, this champion that you thought you had is all of a sudden getting challenged, and they are, surprisingly booted out of office. And, oh, we thought that they were safe. We thought that they were in good shape. Never let up, because there's always someone pushing in the opposite direction. So affirm those who are doing the work, support them as much as you can, support legislation, write op-eds and letters to the editor in support of, X, Y, and Z issue, post it on your social media that you're happy that the legislature did this, because it all builds and helps to bolster your position and your support overall.
I guess, how do you find a champion for a cause, right? So something that's not, maybe it's a very particular issue, not very many people are paying attention to it. How do you go about finding a champion? You talked about in the presentation, you have different levers you could pull. You have legislators, you have other people within administration. So I guess if you could just shed any light on that.
Looking at who is issue adjacent. Is there someone who is championing something that is, similar to or related to your particular issue, or the nuance around your particular issue that could be a good ally, could be a good champion? We've seen, people come out and as the person who is the biggest champion, and they rally people around their issue because they're like, this was my experience and I don't want this to happen to other people. Or I am very passionate about this because of X, Y, and Z reason. It goes back to that original story of like, what is keeping you up at night and why? And if you don't find someone who is already out there, start making your own noise, and then start telling people, in the related space about your story and what you're trying to change and how you're trying to do it. And if you have an understanding, going back to that piece of learning the landscape of how your issue has fit in or not fit in, or, it may be, oh, we didn't even realize that was a thing. Well, because this other piece was so dominant at the time, but there were still, this other thing that was out there. And we need to make sure that we draw attention to that as well. Oftentimes you will see people drawn to that, and, allies and partnerships form because of because things are adjacent. So, don't be afraid to step out. I know that can be very scary, but don't be afraid to step out, but also look and see who else is in that space and have conversations. And if they're not as aggressive on the issue as you want them to be, or as you would be, or they don't have the full grasp of the knowledge about that issue, teach them. And then also step off the sidelines and put yourself out there as well, because people will identify with you around your story and around your passion.
Thank you. And then I have another question from the audience along similar lines. So you spoke before about general public's awareness being one of the challenges. Do you feel that there has been a shift with regards to the level of public awareness around the electoral process with the most recent presidential election and the increase in public discourse around voting rights and processes?
I think there's a lot of discussion about it, but I don't think there's a lot of real understanding of the electoral process and how it all works. And I've been talking to some organizers across the country about how do we get some uniform language about, after your vote is cast, this is what happens, so that you have an understanding of the electoral process and its impact on your day-to-day life. So I think there's a lot of discussion. And I think unfortunately, there's a lot of mis and disinformation out there around the electoral integrity and election protection work overall. But I think there is definitely, I'd say, over the last 5 or 6 years, a heightened awareness of issues and where people stand on various issues. We're not nearly where we should be as a country in terms of electoral participation, but we're getting there. But I think there's a lot of work that needs to be done, just in terms of using some universal language. Can we all agree on what voter fraud is and is not? Can we all agree on what election fraud is and is not? Can we all agree on what the process and the custody of the chain of custody for ballots, and make sure that folks understand what that is and how an election gets certified? And it's not it's not at all abnormal for it to take 30 days post-election before an election is certified. In New York, I think it is between 30 and 45 days on average for the Board of Elections before they will certify, because they have to go through their own checks and balances. And that's not because of fraud or anything else, but it is the way the system is built so that it does have that integrity. So I think just having going back to making sure people actually take civics in school is so important to making sure that we have less of this discord around what safe and secure elections looks like.
Yeah, I was going to raise personal opinion. Civics education really needs to be, there needs to be some sort of, we need to reignite civics education in schools, in my opinion. I've just noticed over the course of the past couple of years, it's definitely highlighted the importance of learning that, those types of materials. So this actually ties into another question I had. So do candidates nowadays have to bake anti-voter suppression efforts into their campaign strategies? Across the country, we're seeing more and more measures making it harder for Americans, particularly Black people, the elderly, students, people with disabilities to vote. Is it more of a problem for candidates in states with a history of voting discrimination, or a problem everywhere?
I think it's a problem everywhere because I think everyone, we know the track record of some of the southern states, and it's well documented, the voter suppression tactics. But I think when anyone thinks that they are immune to that, that's when they are susceptible to it. So, there were 3 ballot initiatives that failed in New York that were around expanding and increasing the accessibility for voting, and they all failed. New York actually has some of the more rigid laws around who can vote and your ability to vote. And we just got early voting, where there have been some states, like the state of Oregon and I think the state of Vermont, automatically send ballots in the mail to their voters, and they've been doing it for decades without a problem. Where we're just getting to the point where you don't have to vote on the first Tuesday in November. You have more time. So I think there is a lot that can be done overall, and I think unfortunately we're in this space where the candidates really need to think through their language around elections and encouraging people to vote, and slip ups and just being gregarious and saying everybody should have the right to vote. People jump on that and say, oh, you want undocumented immigrants to be able to vote, or you want non-citizens to vote because you said everyone should vote, and so it makes it very very challenging. You have to be very careful with your words, but I think they're also being able to have their own security and understanding around making sure that their website doesn't get hacked, making sure that people have the correct information about when to go to the polls, because we still see in almost every election anywhere in the country, there's always some mailer that's going out to some underrepresented community, giving them the wrong information for the election, which is deliberately to suppress that vote. So there's so many tactics out there that candidates just need to be ready to combat, and in some cases be very much on the offense in terms of providing trusted information to voters so that they know when to vote, where to vote, what they need to bring with them, if anything, and that they have confidence in the electoral process.
Thank you. And just switching gears a bit, so we received an audience question. How important is leadership development in a successful campaign?
I think it is very important, and just being able to have the confidence and the tools to be able to move people, because that ultimately is what a leader is, being able to move people, and then also being able to engage, delegate and get people to do what you need them to do when you need them to do it. And anything that you can, do to bolster those skills. I strongly encourage, there are many elected officials, from members of the US Senate to city council members, who are always looking for and seeking out leadership training. Aspen Institute, Rodell, Leadership Fellows. There's countless programs to continue to support and enrich their leadership skills so that they can be more effective in their jobs, because you are motivating people to vote for you. You are motivating your staff to be responsive to their constituents, to move major balls for you, whether it's legislation or otherwise, working with your colleagues in collaboration. So there's constantly work that needs to be done, and the better you are at it, the more effective you'll be.
Thank you. And so we received a couple of audience questions that touch more on, well, they ask you more about your personal leadership experience. So can you talk a little bit about founding Higher Heights? What was your motivation behind founding it?
So my motivation behind founding Higher Heights came from several years of working in New York City and New York State electoral politics, and seeing a disparity between how Black women candidates were treated, how Black women operatives were treated, the organizing of Black voters, and really just saying, you know what, there needs to be, and particularly, as I was in this realm, remember I was working with a candidate who had endorsed one of the presidential candidates back in 2004, I believe it was. And we were on a conference call, and I said, well, where do I, as a Black woman, and I have a Black woman candidate, do I talk to the women's desk or do I talk to the African American outreach desk? And they're like, oh, well, you should just talk to the African American outreach desk. And I said, well, what are you doing specifically for Black women? And the message that you're putting out there is not resonating with them. You're not speaking to the unique challenges and opportunities that they have. So how do we fix that? And they were really kind of at a loss. And I found this kind of time and time again. And as I built my career as a political fundraiser prior to founding Higher Heights, I said, you know what, we need to shift this paradigm and create a political home for Black women, because we know that there are shortcomings in the women's space. There was not really a whole lot going on in the African American space, particularly around electoral politics. There were a lot of traditional nonprofits and advocacy organizations, but there wasn't anything that had particularly bridged that gap. So we decided, it's not just for, it was my dear friend Glenda Carr and I started going through our phones and putting together lists of our girlfriends and saying, this person could do this and this person could do that. And we just said, if we can, between the two of us, we can come up with almost 300 Black women in New York who would benefit from this space in some way, shape, or form. How many thousands of them are across the country? And we sat in a Brooklyn cafe in February of 2011 and came up with the name and how we wanted to be funded, and our first couple of donors and our initial board that day. And little did we know that we would elect a Black woman to the U.S. Senate, grow the number of Black women in Congress, support a Black woman running for president, and we're there to see her be sworn in as vice president and continue to grow Black women's leadership all across the country. And it was really just a matter of, that thing of this is what keeps me up at night. How can I be helpful? And I said, I don't want to run, but I know there are countless Black women out there who do and who should. So how do I use, my knowledge base and my connections and my, desire to connect folks together to make it easier for them? And that's how Higher Heights was born.
That's an incredible story, and thanks for all the work you're doing on that front. So I think we're almost about to wrap up. Unless there are any other questions, we might have time for one more question. All right. Well, we have one other question. What's your most exciting victory? You spoke a little bit about founding Higher Heights, which is an incredible victory in and of itself. But if there's any other victory you would want to share with us.
I think probably one of the sweetest victories was attached to our current Attorney General when she won for public advocate. That had been a very long and drawn out race where she was in a primary and then a runoff. We had thankfully nominal challenges for the general, but to see her put her hand on the Bible and take the oath as she was sworn in, it was definitely very moving. And to have been in the trenches in that campaign that in many respects had a lot of racism, sexism, and misogyny in it was really very moving. And I think similarly, when she took the oath to become the Attorney General of the state, it was also very, very moving. I was not directly involved in that campaign, but because I was, as Higher Heights, we had endorsed her and supported her. So I was there, but to see her climb that leadership ladder and climb it successfully was just such a clear articulation of the work that we wanted to do as an organization to help Black women not just step off the sidelines for that initial run, but to continue to climb, and the impact that we can have as we really take even more of our share of elected leadership in this country. So I think those were the two very professionally significant moments for me.
Those are two huge accomplishments, and I can't even imagine the feeling. But that's amazing. Well, I think we're about to wrap up. So thank you again. I'll turn it over to Sarah.
No, you got it, Constantine.
Yeah, no, I wanted to thank everyone for joining ABNY University Bootcamp. And I'll turn it over to Sarah in case you had any.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank everyone again for joining. Constantine, thank you so much for being such an all-star moderator. And Kimberly, I can't thank you enough. This was really, really incredible. I can say that I personally learned so much throughout this presentation and was stealthily taking notes while my cat. So I really appreciate it. And really just inspiring. What a way to kick off the year and to end this series. And really just something that I really took away from it is that everyone can do something to their ability and their skill set and their time commitments. And I think that's just such a valuable lesson as we're all juggling careers and all these different things. And to hear about how we could be so impactful in our own ways and that could look different for everyone else really, really resonated. And I just appreciate it so much. So thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, you're very welcome. It was my pleasure.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. And thanks again for joining the series.